Hello, my name is Claire Thomas, and I'm reading What Einstein Told His Cook To by Robert Woke. So far, the book has had a lot of tie-ins with Chem 1 and Chem 2. For instance, it's talked about how explaining why alcohols are alcohols, that they all have the OH molecules, and also talked a little bit about how those alcohols interact with organic acids to create esters. It also touched on freezing points a little bit, bringing back to what we learned in Chem 2 about colligative properties. Namely, it talked about Coca-Cola and how in Coca-Cola it's not a pure mixture, obviously, and so it has water, and which we know freezes at 0 degrees Celsius. But it also has such things like phosphoric acid, food coloring, sweeteners, and such, which have different freezing points. And so if one was to put it in a freezer, they might be able to see those differences in the freezing points as the Coca-Cola mixture does freeze. Also talked about fermentation. A little bit of biological processes in there mentioned. The chemical processes involved in that, citric acid cycle. Also touched on polarity, namely looking at butter and how butter is used to thicken sauce in cooking, and which is has a better result than when using olive oil. And the reason for that was that butter can kind of be looked at as a water and a fat substance, although it's mostly fat, but the way that the water globules in butter are so uniformly dispersed makes it ideal for such things as thickening the sauce, because it has is a little better at breaking that polarity boundary. Also talked a little bit about denaturing proteins, and how when you do denature them, it changes their structure, it unwinds their chemical structure. And that also, I mean, obviously is going to relate to cooking, in that when you cook such things as an egg white in a skillet, you're denaturing that protein. It mentioned a few oxidation and reduction reactions, which we talked about in both Chem 1 and Chem 2. Another thing, in Chem 1 we talked about what makes a chemical reaction a chemical reaction. And in this book it talked about anthoxanthins in potatoes, namely. And when one cuts a potato with a steel knife, those anthoxanthins react with that steel knife, making the potato turn a blue-gray to display that chemical reaction. Also, it touched a little bit on LD50 levels, which we talked about in Chem 1 and tech writing. Altogether, I think this book really has been doing a good job so far about tying in Chem 1 and Chem 2 stuff, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what other stuff it has to offer.